Sundry's YouTube, as well as Geek and Sundry's Twitch. We're the bigger, better, i.e. freer version of Alpha Book Club. I'm Hector Navarro, and joining me as always are my co-hosts, Nerdist Editor-in-Chief Rachel Heine. Hi, Rachel.
Hello, cheers.
And Geekbomb's Maude Garrett. Hello, Maude.
Oh, what's up? Hi, how's it going?
Are we bringing back the WhatsApp already? We're doing that? Okay, let's not do it.
Oh, absolutely not. Oh, gosh, no. How many times? What's Elvish for no? Maybe Dwarven for absolutely.
Someone tell us in the chat. Yes.
I think it's Norn. Thank you for joining us. If you've ever, that might be Australian for no. if you've never joined us before, this is our online live book club where we discuss all of our favorite nerdy tomes with you. And of course, you're as much a part of this book club as we are. So welcome to you all. We're so excited. And welcome to all who have joined us on Nerdist YouTube, Geek and Sundry's YouTube, and Geek and Sundry's Twitch. Hello there, we see you. This month, we're reading J.R.R. Tolkien's The Hobbit. And over the past 2 weeks, we discussed the first 2/3 of the book. And this week, we'll be covering the final part of the book, which has some really good stuff in it, including some dragons and some battles.
Yeah.
Along with its animated and live action film adaptation. So I can't wait to get into that discussion. We also wanted to show off some of the incredible fan art sent to us by Robert Westall, who goes by Odd Noggins with a Z on Twitter. There's one of each of us. So let's check them out.
Yay. Let's. Ooh.
Oh.
Wow.
I have very feet.
It.
Yes.
It's awesome. Yeah.
They're so good.
They show there's a couple of them and they're so fun.
They're
Hector, you make such a great Hobbit.
I know. I really do. I'm not going to show you, but I am barefoot right now because I'm at home. I'm wearing shorts, just hanging out. It's hot.
Same.
And I'm looking at it and I'm like, I look like Peter Jackson directing a movie. I look like Peter Jackson directing a movie. I have like a nice shirt on and then comfy shorts and bare feet. And I have the tops of my feet are kind of hairy. But another huge thanks to Robert. Those were awesome. Thank you.
They're so
much.
fun.
Check out some more of his work on Twitter or on his website, Odd, that's ODD, Noggins, NOGGINZ.net. Oddnoggins.net.
Watch the movies first.
Yeah, that's what mine says.
I know.
It's so good. All right.
Dead in the background of Rachel's.
Yeah, we're both of us
No,
dead.
you guys, I'm here to rescue you from the spiders.
What does that say about our friendship that we assumed you had killed us? Oh.
I feel like Maude is more likely.
Maybe, I know. But see, Maude would do it with an invisible ring and then sneakily take us out. Yeah, that's how she'd do it. Yep.
Thank you, guys.
Of course I would rescue you. Rude.
Of course. We would all rescue each other.
I just look evil because I look gothy.
Always goth. Always goth. That's what it is. Always goth.
I don't know where that comes from.
Pure goth. It's because you're goth. It's always goth.
Not really.
So now I'm going to...
say goth?
Huh?
Drink every time you say goth?
Goth. So now...
Goth.
I'm going to do a real brief previously on in the style of the opening for Lost. Previously on The Hobbit.
Yes.
Bilbo and company made it to the Lonely Mountain, and the section ended just as the secret door opened. That's where we were. So now we get to talk about this whole third part of the book.
Great.
You're welcome, Lee, for the Lost reference. That was for you. So we do want to... It's interesting because like this last part of the book is... Say that again, Maude?
It doesn't have Gollum. The first chunk has a good Gollum section.
I'm fine with that. I don't need a sad frog at all. And if it's like, honestly, if that ring is his precious that he's been hunting for like for centuries and he's just put it somewhere like nitty gritty, Gollum needed pockets.
Much like every dress. Actually, the dress I'm wearing right now has pockets.
Yeah, it's weird. Like let's talk about that for a second because going back to section 1, in the books, Gollum had like buried the ring somewhere, right? I forget how Bilbo saw that he like.
No, he was. I'm pretty sure he was sneaking. He had like eaten a goblin earlier that day.
Yeah.
And it like he lost it. So it wasn't.
But
yeah, he didn't specifically hide it, but he dropped it, which is where Bilbo picks it up.
And
like in the
Bilbo
end
sees him drop it. Is that
what
happens?
No. He basically finds it because it was.
How long do you think Gollum didn't have the ring for? Because this being.
It was. I took it as this day.
Yeah.
Personality trait to me. the kind of person that would have to be holding it, wearing it, and know of it
At all times.
At all times. So for him to be like,
well,
like, it's so much precious. It's like, well, man, that's on you.
Yeah.
So as someone who loses
if you're not gonna
everything precious to me, including my keys, my debit card, my ID, I lose everything. It's just how my brain works. It's super fun. But what I took it to mean was when they were describing him in the passageway, or when they were describing Gollum and sort of who he is and what his whole deal is, creepy, scary, ring possessing frogman. It said that sometimes the goblins would make their way down that path, but usually not very much, but that, you know, a goblin would go down there looking for a fish and neither a fish or a goblin would come back. So my thinking was that morning, I believe I did the audiobook, so I can't immediately look at it right now, but if someone has the copy, you could do that. But I think it said that he had eaten a young goblin earlier that morning. And so he dropped it there and he didn't really realize that he had lost it yet, which I'm just going to say I can relate to. I can relate to that.
And Bilbo in the books just like steps on it, like comes across
and picks it up.
And I think that and the way that time is going to be different in a books versus a movie. It's interesting that we just had that convo because I feel like the makers of the live action Hobbit movie, Peter Jackson and company, they had the same conversation because in the movie they show Gollum dropping it when he's like struggling to either kill a goblin or take a fish or something. Like they show you Bilbo seeing that it's dropped, ding, 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 and then Bilbo goes to pick it up because he sees
moments in between.
Yes. Right.
Which reminds me of the flashback in
the Fellowship of the Ring.
Is it Fellowship of the Ring?
Yeah,
at the
opening.
Shows in the opening he lost. I think so.
Yeah.
Reminded me of that. Which
so we got some great comments in the chat. Nathan S says, "No" in Elvish is no with an umlaut over the N, line through the O. Julie Manning says, "Long-time listener, first-time caller, happy to be here. Welcome, Julie." Bradley Easton says, "The audiobook was amazing. Thanks, Rachel, for the suggestion. The songs were awesome." So good work there.
I mean, are you doing the animated one or the audio?
Yeah, that's what it is. But
I know.
It's that old 70s style of like
the Hobbit. I'm not gonna do the whole thing because we might get in trouble.
It's great. It's great.
I'll just
if you missed also, number one, thank you to everyone for watching that. I'm so amazed that we did that, and it is a trip. And Maude, I know that you were saying that you were glad you were not stoned while watching, and that
well, initially I was like, I really need to be, and then the spiders came out and I was like, I'm glad they're not.
I would only do that if it depends on how you roll, but that was a favorite.
Lauren's nose looked like a shoe.
Yeah.
But Dumbledore's nose looked like a foot. Like it even had the divots for the ankle.
A lot of noses.
My nose looks like a foot.
No, it does not.
No, it
but
doesn't.
Gandalf's looked like the country of Italy. It did.
That's what I was just thinking. Yeah. But the last unicorn, which is the same animators, it's actually a much better version, but we'll get to that.
Yeah. Versus the book, The Last Unicorn. Is that what you were going to say?
I haven't read the book, but no, it's Rankin and Bass and Top
Gun.
The animation the Japanese animation company.
Oh, very cool. That would eventually go to mostly be Studio Ghibli. That's what ends up happening.
Yes, and they did The Last Unicorn, which I think has a better animation style and production value.
So it started off basically being Studio Ghibli, and now it's Studio Ghibli.
Studio what?
Ghibli. Oh, lovely Ghiblis. No, it's a British thing. Anyway,
nope.
Hey,
never heard of it.
Last third of this book so fast. So much happens in it.
In fact, our old friend Reading Dodo Kiwi says this part of the book felt rushed. And this happened, and then these guys turned up, and it's very, very quick. But it does have some of my favorite stuff, which is Smaug, which I want to get into. So chapter 12 is inside information. And this is Bilbo sneaks into Smaug's lair. We finally get to see Smaug. We get to see the description. Bilbo sneaks a cup out to prove that he went in. It's like a back and forth, right? But Smaug knows that something's been stolen. Bilbo's like, you should have hired 500 burglars to get this treasure out, much less kill the dragon. What are you doing?
He's like, what are the logistics of this now? How are we going to solve this treasure out of here?
When we get to that point.
Good point.
Yeah, when we get to that point, Tolkien's like, oh, logistically, this makes no sense. Whatever. So Bilbo sneaks back in. He has a confrontation with Smaug. They have a sort of battle of wits. It's very flirtatious, where Bilbo tricks Smaug into showing off his weakness, a patch on the underside with no dragon scales. Then Bilbo gets back to the dwarves. They describe their most prized treasure, the Arkenstone, which, again, if you go back to those adaptations, the benefit in hindsight when you do that is that you can introduce at the beginning, like, we're looking for the Arkenstone. So right, that doesn't just sort of pop up.
Which they don't include in the animated one.
Correct.
By the way.
Yeah, a lot of by the ways. And then Smaug attacks the secret entrance and the dwarves are stuck inside the mountain. All that happens in chapter 12. So first question, what did y'all think of the description of Smaug?
Yes, Rachel.
Smaug is a cat.
Yeah.
Smaug has the attitude of a cat. He shows you his belly. He's a little sassy. He loves being flattered. Does
not like being wrong or told what to do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I love him. If he were tiny, I would try to pet his belly and then get burnt. But I also love the animation.
Yes, that was. I was going to say, I bet you we could get you a small Smaug, some kind of a statue.
I have the animated Smaug right here.
Wait, Maude, you have an animated Smaug?
Yeah, movie Smaug.
Wow,
like a werewolf.
She's cute.
This cutie. Hi, Zelda.
Zelda.
I was expecting when I spoke about Smaug like he was a baby for Pan to be like, Mare, who are you talking about?
Me? I'm baby. So even if I, at times, because I love cool classic dragons, and to me Smaug is like the most classic of classic dragons. Like there's almost like least variation on the dragon idea. It's just so standard. Maude,
Smaug has a question. Was it Tolkien that decided that dragons were obsessed with gold, and was it inlaid from there on? Because I was listening to another fantasy book where it brought up dragons being obsessed with gold, and I was like, okay, that's so interesting that this is now a thing. Was it Tolkien?
Was that a more recent? I'm sure that book was released.
4 years ago.
I don't know. I feel like that's a good question. Chat, can you do some research for us? Because I feel like the
notion of the dragon
fairy tales have that kind of
quite a few centuries, but like,
Tolkien took it from Norse myths. Says Game Wizard.
And also wasn't there medieval myths? I'm sure that incorporated dragons and different things in like English.
I think so.
I'm sure. But that's a great question.
Norse myths. All sorts of myths predate it. Yeah, which I find really interesting and conversation for Twitter. But I just finished a really great book that dealt with all of these different mythologies ending up being sort of real, and I just love the idea that maybe at some point there were giants and different things like that, and they're part of legend now, or even like looking at Sumerian and Egyptian and all these things. Like, were they aliens? I think so. I mean, I don't know, but I like thinking about it.
The guy with the hair.
Aliens.
I was going to say about Smaug, and especially when you watch the animated one that we watched from 1977, he's very cat-like and has whiskers. If there were any hesitations on my part where I'm like, I don't know if he's cat-like, I think I'm proven wrong, because I love the movies How to Train Your Dragon, and Toothless in that is just a cat. Like, those are so also cat-like, right? Those dragons are also.
They used cats and kittens moving around to kind of track their emotions and make them. Those movies. Actually, don't think I've seen the third one, and I should, because I love them.
Fine.
Like, they make me. But they just make me want to cry, much like the live action Lion King. I couldn't tell you if I actually liked it, because the moment that I saw those realistic cats, just like lion cubs doing that, I was like,
here's great comment from Steven Zerwinski in the chat. Steven says, I think it's retconned in either Lord of the Rings or in the Lord of the Rings movie that in The Hobbit, the ring wanted to get away from Gollum. So it sensed an opportunity, which I think is a smart again, if Tolkien didn't have the whole thing planned out, which he didn't, and that's fine. That's such a
from
smart
the opening of, at the very least, from Lord of Fellowship of the Ring, where it says the ring sort of abandoned its master and found a new one. Yeah.
All right, all you cool cats and kittens. Let's move on to chapter 13. Chapter 13 is called Not at Home. In this, the dragon is gone from the lair, but they're not sure where to. Bilbo finds and hides the Arkenstone. This sneaky little dude finds and hides the Arkenstone.
But he doesn't know that it's the Arkenstone.
He doesn't know, yeah.
Really?
Like,
okay.
This looks expensive.
Yeah. Well, doesn't the Arkenstone have like a pull to it as well? Like
it's got sort of a light.
Yeah.
It reflects a bunch of,
I loved, in the book, I love the description of the Arkenstone. I thought it was so good.
Should someone read it?
So good. I mean, if you all know what page it's on in my, I'll pull it up, but
13.
The other thing that happens in chapter 13, I don't know when the description, I guess it would be in chapter 13, is that the dwarves explore the halls before Thorin leads them out to an old dwarven watchtower. And I feel like, correct me if I'm wrong too, just like the rest of this book, it's a thing of like, the dwarves and Bilbo were in there for days. It's this constant, like, right? They're trapped in there for like weeks before they find it, just this constant like traversing through time. Bradley Easton has a comment after reading the book and having watched. You found it. Ooh, okay. Hold that thought, Maude. I'm going to have you read in 1 second. Bradley Easton says, after reading the book and having watched the movies first, I understand why people were upset it was 3 movies. And then Adam Shearer says, Gandalf did a poor job outsourcing the burglary. Honestly, yeah. Maude, hit us with that description for the Arkenstone.
Bilbo was climbing the great mound of treasure. Soon he stood upon the top and still went on. Then they saw him halt and stoop for a moment, but they did not know the reason. It was the Arkenstone, the heart of the mountain. So Bilbo guessed from Thorin's description, but indeed there could not be 2 such gems, even in so marvelous a hoard, even in all the world. Ever as he climbed, the same white gleam had shone before him, yes, I say shone, and drawn his feet towards it. Slowly it grew to a little globe of pallid light. Now, as he came near, it was tinged with a flickering sparkle of many colors at the surface, reflected and splintered from the wavering light of his torch.
Sounds cool. It sounds like an opal almost, where opals are they sort of mirror all the other colors. I also saw something in the chat, if I can find it again, said there's so much, Mary Forrest, there's so much serendipity in Bilbo's fate. Super agree, but also think that that's part of Unlikely Heroes as well. I mean, even just thinking about our old pal Harry Potter, and many of the ways that he survived were magic from his mother's sacrifice and needing to keep him alive for bringing back Voldemort, all those kinds of things, where I take more, I don't really take issue with it because of the type of story it is, but Gandalf showing up at the best possible time more than Bilbo kind of finding a bit of luck, because it is about him figuring out, I can be a leader, I can make plans. And I do like in these sections of the book, they really acknowledge that he's basically their leader now, and they've been making fun of him the entire time. And then we get into, which I'm sure you'll cover, just like when you're like, are the dwarves the bad guys?
If I may, another fantasy series that uses serendipitous, collection of people a lot more than that is Robert Jordan's Wheel of Time. 3 boys who just grew up in this small little town. All of a sudden, each of them have their fate kind of like intertwined in the, healing of the world, saving the world. So, comparatively, nah.
Yeah, I think there's part of him being not taken seriously and not being the type of being that you would necessarily be on the lookout for across all of these different situations. The spiders, the trolls, the goblins, everything, they just sort of, even the dwarves, they're sort of like, well, he's just a hobbit. So, and then he ends up being a little sweetie.
As another fellow short king, I do appreciate the story of Bilbo Baggins. He is awesome, and he's a short king, and we have no choice but to stand.
We stand this short king.
Yes.
And you, Hector.
In this short king.
No.
What was your question?
Bilbo was immune to greed.
What was say that again? Why is Bilbo immune to greed?
The way he's raised, I think he's happy with like we were talking a little bit on the Discord on Geekbomb last week about privilege. Yeah. But I think it's less. I think it's sort of if you compare places where it's easier and less expensive to buy property or live on less and being in sort of a big city. There's that sort of element, but I also think it's entitlement. But
the dwarves feel entitled to it because it's his predecessors.
Thorin. Yes.
Absolutely.
100%. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And this sort of stubbornness that we start seeing in this section where they're talking about, I know I watched the first one. I'm going to watch the second too tonight.
It's entitlement. And I think it's also
pride.
Yes. And maybe it's because I'm letting some of the movies influence and color my idea of the character, but I also feel like the Hobbit story also lets us know Thorin feels pressure from this lineage, from this legacy, because he's like, oh, I'm fated to be the king of the mountain, and my father failed, and my grandfather failed, and they have to. So I feel like there is still this sense of this guy does have a lot on his shoulders. Thorin does, but that also just may be like when you spend 2.5 hours with the guy in the second movie, like
it becomes different. But I also think Bilbo, for him, it's not that he has a lot of wealth, or I mean, we don't even know what kind of currency they're using necessarily, but it's like this is how their people live.
Content.
They're happy. The butcher comes by, once a week with some potentially salted meats. I don't know. I want to know the logistics of that, but and he makes a bunch of cakes for himself and smokes smoke rings outside and is like, cool, I'm watching the sunset. That's it. He's chill.
He's the embodiment of contentment.
Yeah.
Yeah. With what he has.
Yes.
And it's not more or less than anyone else in Hobbiton has. That's what they all have. And I like too that even throughout this whole adventure, he's never he thinks about the logistics and he's like, wow, that's a good point. I don't know how they're going to get all of this out of there while Smaug is buzzing around. But it never seems like he's tempted by his own pride of being a leader and learning about the ring and those things. But that's, I think, a little more normal. He never becomes greedy. Even with the gold, he's like, you guys, if you're going to be this intense about it, I don't care.
That's the thing. And it's like, he left forgetting everything. And then at the end, he's like, well, I can only really realistically carry 2 bags of gold. I had to use it to buy back all of his furniture. So he ended up kind of still with nothing. Yeah.
But the best thing that he ended up with, if we're going to shortcut to the end, is I love this detail in the book that I wish was in the movies, and I don't think it was in the animated film either, but at the end he gets visited by Dwalin. He gets visited by Gandalf and Dwalin, and they show up, and to me, reading it was like the happiest thing ever, to where Bilbo was like, oh, come in, and they just spent an afternoon just catching up and talking, and I'm like, that's the treasure.
So I made a parallel reading this, and it's like traveling with acquaintances, like kind of on a global trip. So it's like you're stuck with these people. You've all got different ideas of what you want to do and how you want to spend the day and itineraries. Some people are keen to kind of do very little. Other people really want to do a lot. But if something goes down on that trip, it bonds you. And I think I know we keep making parallels again to Harry Potter.
Yeah.
But they weren't exactly friends. Like we couldn't understand how Hermione sort of fit in personality-wise because she was so aggressive and abrupt at the start and a know-it-all. But then the troll happened in the dungeon. The troll in the dungeon thought you ought to know. And then it completely fused them, and it was almost irrefutable that these 3 weren't going to be friends for the rest of their lives. Like that's what brought them together. And what you're seeing in this moment with Dwalin and Gandalf is this big part of, he grew so much on that journey, and he became a new person at the end of it. But Dwalin was there along the ride. And so he's formed like trust and brotherhood sort of like relationship in that moment. And I like that as well, because he kind of like lost a lot of lease for life. Like turns out his family weren't great, trying to steal all his stuff. He didn't really have anyone to share his life with. He tried to go back to normal, and he said it just never felt normal again. So it was really interesting to see how it affected him.
Yeah.
Well, that's such a good point. And I think also, they're in the trenches together, right? That turn of phrase. And it's very, you can like a trip or summer camp, or if anyone ever did musical theater, whether you were a stage crew or in it or whatever, it's a very like, you're in it together or working together. Like the some of the people that I started out working with at Nerdist when we were just like in a warehouse.
Yep.
I talk to them all the time, and there's this journey, or friends you've had for a long time who have seen you grow. And in the case of Tolkien in World War I, that is like the extreme version of no one else will understand this except those that are there. And that feeling, it's that kind of friend where you can not talk for any amount of time, and as soon as you see each other, it's like it's the same. It's exactly the same. Yeah.
On the topic of hobbits and their selfishness, Elmer Tevez has a great comment. In fact, if I remember correctly, hobbits give away gifts instead of receiving gifts on their birthdays, which is cool. On the topic of the Arkenstone, Clever Girl says, I love the description of the Arkenstone so much, and it didn't even make an appearance in the animated movie. That was weird. It would have been cool to see them do the way that they made Elrond shiny with the halo. I'm like, do that to the Arkenstone.
Elrond looked so cool.
He's so beautiful. And Clever Girl also says, I can't help but stand a short king who isn't afraid to fight spiders. Game Wizard 001 says, less immune. No, was that you, Steven? Was that your comment? That was Steven's comment. Never mind. But thanks, Clever Girl. Game Wizard 001 says, less immune, I'd say, to greed and more resistant to greed. Because there is a few moments even, and I think, right, I think Lord of the Rings probably, again, sort of in retrospect, cleaned some of this up a bit about the power of the ring and what it can do. So Bilbo fought that. So let's move into chapter 14. Chapter 14, Fire and Water. And I just want to say, side note, fire and water. Thank you, Maude. I want to say water.
I'll never say the bad phrase again. I still feel bad about it from last week.
What was it? What was the bad phrase?
Crikey!
Oh, that one. That's right. Water. Fire and water.
Water. That's better. Yeah.
The title of chapter 14 reminds me of, if you enjoy the Peter Jackson Hobbit films, the scores are done by Howard Shore, who also did the Lord of the Rings music. And what's so cool is that there will be tracks that are just named after the chapters in the book, The Hobbit. Yeah. So like when I was reading the book, I'm like, oh, I'm at Fire and Water. Let me just put on Fire and Water. And it was awesome. This is what happens in this chapter. The Laketown people see light and think it's Thorin literally turning the river gold like the prophecies. Nope, it's Smaug come to attack. We meet a new character in this chapter who ends up being pretty important from here on out, Bard. Bard is a dour guy, but solid. He leads the defense of the town while the master is trying to escape. Bard manages to use his black arrow to kill Smaug with the help of a little bird, right? The bird told him how to do it.
MVP.
The thrush. MVP thrush. Thrush? Yeah. Just like the rat in Avengers Endgame is the MVP, the thrush in this one is the MVP.
Can we just acknowledge that this bird is called Thrush?
Thrush. It's a thrush. I don't know what that means. The town wants to crown him King Bard after he. What's that? What's that, Maude?
It's fine. I couldn't stop thinking about that the whole time.
Thinking about what?
Never mind.
Just Google it, Hector. Just Google it.
Google it? I have to Google the word
Not
thrush?
Right now. I don't want to say it.
Is it a bad word?
It's a lady issue.
Google doctor it.
Oh, it's a lady issue.
Don't do it now. I'll continue.
I'm doing it now. Thrush definition. Take it, Maude.
Certain type of body type.
It says a small or medium-sized songbird. That's what the internet says.
There you go. That's all.
Oh, wait. Item number 2.
Yeah, no.
Yeast infection. Okay. Most common types. Oral thrush.
Again, was Tolkien one who came up with Bard? Because it's like the Bard, the D&D class hadn't existed yet. So this is the first time I'd heard Bard outside of D&D.
Also, can we just take a second to talk about his armor outfit with the shorts? A true hero. Every time they showed them like in the animated one, he's wearing like 70s shorts with like his
Bard is?
Yes.
Bard's calves are insane.
They're nice. They're nice calves.
Yeah, everyone in Laketown just must do calf raises like every day.
This chapter 14, gets into the ruin in the aftermath. Even though they won, many fell ill and died even after they won, right? The town is decimated. And news of Smaug's death travels fast, and the Elven King of Mirkwood Lee Pace is moving his army. Ooh, sexy Lee Pace. So, oops.
What an upgrade.
Now I get the comment, hey, don't Google it now. Yeah. Great. Thanks, Stephen. Oh, too late. So that's what happens in chapter 14. And I feel like the battle is very quick, right? Taking down Smaug is this very quick thing, even though he's built up to be this impossible almost threat and challenge. And
does this give Game of Thrones flashbacks? The entire 7-8 seasons was like the White Walkers and the Night King is the threat, and then he's taken out, but it's like, oh wait, people can't figure their own shit out, so they're all gonna fight between themselves, and then now that's the real end.
I can't speak to Game of Thrones because I only watched the first season, and then I was like, I think I'm okay. I'm fine. Great show, though.
Shocked.
Yeah.
I'm just shocked. No, I was going to say could probably take a long time talking about the last 2 seasons of Game of Thrones, so I won't even start. But I will say that I think, and as we dive into the final chapters of the book, the difference and similarities with Game of Thrones is, yes, the battles are a big part of it, and the fight for the Iron Throne and all of that. But it is actually about, can you break the wheel and all of these characters? And I think the Game of Thrones lost sort of that thread, whereas The Hobbit, it is actually about the unexpected journey and not about the battles. They are not the important part. The important part is him figuring himself out, him pushing himself, the relationships, him saving, all of the things we're about to talk about. That's why even with as much as I after rewatching the first Hobbit movie, and I will watch the other 2, I do enjoy, I love and I love the actors and the characters. Good. Those are all so great. But the idea of having basically a movie dedicated to the sequence that Tolkien went out of his way to not glorify and show.
True.
Just didn't sit well with me, and that's so intentional, because it is not about that. It is not about. It's about those personal moments and Thorin and Bilbo having, and we'll get into it. But yeah, I think that's
a good observation. That's a good observation, is to say, and I don't think you are. I think it's very valid to think of Tolkien as being anti-war. Because of his experiences, he's a pacifist. And so to have an entire movie that is this huge extended war sequence, like, it's cool as hell. Like, don't get me wrong, there's dope stuff in it. Bjorn shows up, just like they describe at the end of this book. Like when Gandalf's like, you missed it, Bilbo.
I don't think I've ever seen the third one, but I'm going to.
I like it. It's fine.
I know, but that's okay.
Yeah.
Elves, dwarves, humans, goblins, wolves. Battle of Five Armies.
Eagle.
You know what?
The goblins and wolves are together, yes?
Right. I'm a little unclear, and I had to look it up, and I'm getting conflicting information about what the 5 armies actually are. But Maude, you were right. It is, the elves is one. The dwarves, including Thorin and his company, when they meet up with his cousin who shows up, is one. The humans from Laketown is another. And then, like you said, Rachel, the goblins or the orcs or whatever, like the evil stuff is another. And then technically, I think, according to the internet, when the great eagles show up with like
because
Bjorn.
They have their issues with
I've been saying that in the animated movie it's the eagles as the 5th, but in the book it's the wolves are the 5th. And I listened to it a couple of times. I stopped replaying it, and it was like because it really does spell it out. Like, it's a math equation. If a dwarf army and a human army and an elf army go into battle, how many armies are there? And you're like, 3. And then it's like, and now there is a goblin army and a wolf army. So another further 2 armies were in it. Thus make
like Schoolhouse Rock
of 5 armies. And I was like, can't confuse that. But there's a few things that happen within this war part that even Miss Necromancer, I think, right at the start made a quip about it, because I think it's bothering her as much as it's bothering me. And that was, and this giant war happens and everything's going on and boop, I passed out.
Yeah, it's great. It's so
I'm sure a lot of things happen, but
but that happens. Talking about Game of Thrones, that happens with Tyrion in the Battle of Blackwater.
Blackwater. Yeah. I also, listening to the book, there was a throwaway line where it was like, and the animated series kind of did it as well, where it's like, how many made it?
Yeah.
six.
Yeah, the end is very rushed, and I will agree with that. That
in the book,
once we
it was
get
like,
to the
oh,
last
we're gonna miss Thorin and and Goblin and Jibby, but then it was like, and Philly and Killy, and I was like, what? One more time, my boys.
The handsome ones.
Yes.
And listen and like wait for this moment to see if they actually had the reasoning or their time to shine. No, it was a throwaway line that they just happened to die. I am not okay with that. I want justice for Philly and Killy. I'm glad that a whole third of a movie is dedicated to these two. Like more Philly and Killy.
Maude, I've got good news for you. It's all here in this movie.
But I mean, that's the one thing I do appreciate that the movies did. It was like, if you're going to give these characters, because we've just discussed this whole time, they have very little personalities.
Right.
But to actually throw away their entire sort of life, like in half a sentence, I was a little, my mum wrote, Bilbo was accepted by Gandalf. He proved himself worthy. Thanks, Mum.
Oh, your mom.
Aww.
She said I passed.
Hi, Mama Garrett.
Oh, good.
Yeah. We met her, y'all. We met her.
When some great comments, right? Miss Necromancer says, Lee Pace makes Legolas look like the Goblin King. Yikes. That's true. David Nichols Jr. says, the part of this chapter that stuck with me was when the master of the town spins everything to his advantage. Too real. In the animated one, it's Eagles as fifth. Okay, that's you, Stephen. Thank you. But yes, the part about the master of the Laketown. So here's the deal, too.
I don't like if a businessman becomes a president.
Yeah, exactly. I am not a huge fan of the Laketown stuff. Give me my fantasy races and creatures. Give me my, Gandalf and Thorin's company. But I think everything we're talking about it kind of reminds me of like when Christopher Nolan did the Dark Knight Batman movies. There were things that he omitted from Batman comics, things like Robin, the Boy Wonder. And on the one hand, he omits it because he's like, I think it's dumb. I think it's unrealistic. I'm not, it's not a part of what would fit into my movies. But on the other hand, me as a comic book fan, I'm like, yeah, man, but if anybody were to do it, I would want you to do it to see your take on it. Yeah. So with everything that we're saying,
with Joseph Gordon-Levitt.
Nearly. And it's like close. Right. But it would have been cool to see him go full on. And I think in this case, even though Tolkien. You should
watch his Batman and Robin.
Okay. Stop, Rachel. Have a drink of wine. Stop. But the thing I'm trying to connect, the thing I'm trying to connect it to is even though Tolkien is probably rushing through stuff on purpose, the battle, if it's because he's anti-war, that's all good, or because we're rushing past the deaths of Fili and Kili because that's how war is.
That's what I was thinking too.
Right?
Is young men, senseless and quick and
in that same vein, I would have still loved to have seen Tolkien expand on those ideas a little bit, even in this fantasy setting. Like, actually show me. Like in the text, tell me why it is so sad that we lost Fili and Kili, and maybe if you don't want to tell me how they died necessarily, but just like go into a little bit more other than just the one sentence.
They were the younger of the two. I believe it wasn't Kili, Thorin's nephew.
They were both his nephews. Yeah. Thorin was their uncle, and they were like, I know.
Yeah, but and I think that's the great thing about adaptations and why I am so changed in my sort of thinking on this is that on the live action movies is the general idea that adaptations, they can be book to TV, book to movie. There's so many different choices made. They're not the same mediums, especially when you go back to a different era, a different style, a different audience. And so, yes, for a modern audience, you do need those characters. You do need all of it. And especially for a more adult audience, you need, and I agree. Reading this now versus when I was 12, I'm like, oh, I can't tell and that wouldn't have bothered me back then. And being like, no, it's about the greatest adventure.
I sent one to you, Rachel. And Maude, if you're interested, I can send them to you if you haven't seen it. And I'll say this to everybody watching right now in the chat. Lindsay Ellis is a wonderful.
Yes, someone else in the chat just brought up Lindsay Ellis too.
She did a breakdown of the Hobbit movies, and
I'm going to do it after I finish.
Do that. It was going to be a 2-part, and then she turned it into a 3-parter, just like the movies. And it's a really brilliant. The way she breaks it down. My favorite thing about it is that she says from the get, these movies were always kind of fated to fail because the tones of the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit is so different. And by the time we got to the Hobbit movies, millions and millions of people around the world were used to the Lord of the Rings movies.
Yep.
And so now
And
these movies,
that tone.
Yeah,
and so
you
now
can't
these
do a, like, la la songs.
totally.
Like,
So they had to kind of fit, and I
don't have it
think
anymore.
tried into that tone. So I think Lindsay does a great job. If anybody watching hasn't seen this sort of 3-part breakdown, it made me appreciate, but also be more frustrated at the kind of troubled production of the films. But I think it was very like even-handed and really well done. So let's power through the rest of these chapters. Yes. Chapter 15, The Gathering of the Clouds. I'm not trying to do Australian. I'm sorry, Maude. That's not what that was. Okay. 15. The company of dwarves learn what happened through their old friends, the ravens. Thorin sends for help from his cousin Dane and the dwarves. And then the dwarves repair the halls and fortify the sole remaining entrance. The elvish and Laketown armies arrive, and Bard comes to parley. They want some recompense for their troubles because their whole town was destroyed by Smaug. Is that a reasonable request? We'll get into it. But Thorin is affected by the dragon's gold and denies them. The mountain is now under siege. What did you guys think of Tolkien making the noble good guy that you're supposed to root for, Thorin Oakenshield, have some dark streaks to him?
Yeah. I mean, the turn was kind of really interesting because he was the leader. And then you've realized more and more that it was actually Bilbo that had leader qualities. And that leadership position did change. And then you saw what he was really kind of striving for. I liked the fact that Bilbo, again, knew that the Arkenstone was his Achilles heel, and he was able to just not see it as something like, he was like, oh, this is pretty, but he was able to use it as leverage, which I thought was great. Mm-hmm. Should they be paying and splitting it?
Right.
That's a really interesting part, because it's like they had a contract set up for this job, like from the get-go, and a lot of things happen in that interim. Sorry if you can hear that.
Mom, stop texting.
It is my mama. Yeah, she's about the Hobbit.
She can text anytime.
But like the fact that they've gone in with a contract, so it's all set in place, and they have always treated this with very like a business mind. And then obviously a whole town got wiped out. There were casualties beyond measure. This man has taken care of the threat, but he can't see past that, and he doesn't want to sort of like, there's no room for compromise, negotiations, variables. Yeah. So yeah, I liked that, but I feel like Tolkien's done something like this before, where a character in like a kingly position is so easily manipulated of the mind that they can only focus on the one thing, that once that veil lifts, then they're good again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, totally. They're drawn astray, sort of. But I also think, I mean, they weren't super clear with Bilbo about the contract in the first place. And I do like, because there's not, I mean, I understand if this is your legacy and this is your people and your life, and this is about honor and revenge and a little bit of ego and all of these different things. That is such a different mentality than someone who's like, I would much rather just like give some people some of this treasure and work together. Yeah. And I've gotten into conflicts like this in many different, spoiler alert, I'm the Hobbit of this, where I'm like, why don't we just like work together? But like, it doesn't mean that the other person or people or team or whatever you want to call it are wrong. It's just a completely different mentality from how you were brought up, what is important to you, all of those things.
Good and right aren't necessarily the same thing.
Correct.
Yes. I was just listening to Into the
right,
Woods.
The other side is good in a way. I'd like to, Mama Garrett's actually onto something here, and she is, a psychologist.
She's a psychologist. Bring us some Mama.
So we were talking about why this last third of the book really brushed past through this war, and like he was knocked unconscious and he wasn't able to elaborate on it. She says, I think he may have omitted war type stuff because it's too raw for him and it's hard to
honestly,
PTSD.
That makes a bunch of sense, and I really
that's brilliant.
Would understand that, and and I think that again, it's interesting because it's like if you I don't know who would necessarily disagree, but if we're all like simpatico with Tolkien being anti-war, and we know that this is a children's story and we read this to kids, I think it's lovely that Bilbo does get knocked out for the battle of the Five Armies. Yeah, it's like, I think it's lovely for that story and for the audience. But if you're the type of person that you're like, hey man, I can handle it, this is cool fantasy, cool like battle stuff, good news.
All of Lord of the Rings,
Again, exactly. All of Lord of the Rings in a 2.5-hour movie where you just get to see all that stuff. And it's dope. So you're fine. So you can have your cake and eat it too.
Is it worth talking about the decision to keep Thorin's fate has been completely changed, right? From the
His fate?
Yeah, I've only seen the movies once. He still ixnays on that he does. So I read a comment somewhere where it was like Philly and Killy sacrificed themselves to save him.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to get, if you guys haven't seen it recently, I don't want to give things away, but I will say this, like the animated movie.
I've never seen it.
Yeah, right. The animated
I skimmed
film.
through the second one. I like rented it and wanted to watch the Smaug parts.
Yeah, and they're very good.
Tried to watch the barrel sequence and got upset.
It's the Laketown stuff that's boring. It's the Master of the Lake, and like I honestly don't care that much about Bard, even though it's Luke Evans. Even though it's Luke Evans and he's a cutie, that's fine.
Some strong legs and a good heart.
Quick question.
And he uses his son as an aiming device.
That was cool as hell. so that brings me to my next question, because that to me, again, if it's about Thorin feeling this pressure. In the movies, I think they also, maybe it's from the book and I forget, they describe that Bard also comes from the person who originally, like he's a descendant of the person who originally, like singed the armor of Smaug. So he has this pressure of like, well, my great-great-great-great-grandfather, whatever, was able to do that. And now
that caused that patch. Oh.
Yeah, exactly. I think so to have the movie go like, stay still, son. It's fine, son. Look at me, as the dragon's flying right at him. I bought into that stupid father-son stuff like a sucker, because they omitted the thrush walking up and being like, I'm a yeast infection. They didn't do that in the movie. There was no talking bird. A question to you both, is the talking bird a little bit too childlike? Is it like, how do you feel about it?
Yeah. But I was waiting for the animated movie to actually have a bird talk. Like if we're in
they had the eagles. They had the great eagles.
I know.
Eagles talk. Spiders talk.
Yeah.
Goblins talk. The little bird. That was a choice, and I didn't understand it. I just really like that they there are some elements where they simplify it. Obviously, it was for anyone who didn't join us for the watch along, it is a 1977 made for TV animated movie by the folks who did the stop motion Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, Frosty the Snowman, Santa Claus Comes to Town.
Was this a staple of American elementary school?
The Christmas specials 100%.
Yeah.
The Hobbit, I think a specific subset. There were more people participating than I ever could have dreamed. So definitely not alone. But
There's a lot of people that were bothered about the fact that
they did The Last Unicorn, which is one of my tattoos, which is the same company, and also super trippy. And I've never read the book, so we should put that on our list. But the animated specials sort of smooths over some parts, and I just love that instead of explaining that, back in the day, thrushes could understand things, blah, 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 Bilbo's just like, hey, thrush, here's the deal. And then he's like got this hero moment too, where I was like, is the thrush the real hero of The Hobbit? I think so.
Again, just like that Avengers Endgame rat. That's the MVP. He saves Paul Rudd.
But it's that thing again where it's like, did Smaug the dragon even really matter? Because it wasn't the crux or the actual arc of the story.
Exactly.
It was like when that was done, it was like a whole other thing that was actually the real big thing. And again, even having a storyline like that where the whole premise for 3/4 of the book is we need to get the treasure back.
Dragon.
Oh, by the way, it's the Arkenstone. Oh, by the way, now the dragon's dead. Oh, by the way, now it's this thing that Tolkien kind of does where it's like all of a sudden there's a massive army and you're like, a massive fight with 5 armies, and you're just like, what?
And the way that he explains it is like, well, that's what Gandalf's been doing. He's been doing stuff behind the scenes. He knew it was coming. Yeah. I want to give us enough time because we're running out of time and we need so much more than an hour to talk about all this stuff. But let me rush through the next 4 chapters. Let me power through them really quick, back to back.
Yeah.
Back to back. And then we can talk about the animated movie and the other movies. So
we can continue this. We're going to have Discord and also on Twitter, Instagram, everywhere. We can keep talking about it.
I'm all about it. So let me power through these. Chapter 15, The Gathering of the Clouds. In the company of dwarves learned what happened through their old friends, the ravens. Wait, no, I already did that one. I'm on chapter 16, Thief in the Night. This one's great. So Thorin is obsessed with finding the Arkenstone that Bilbo secretly has. Bilbo hatches a plan and sneaks out into camp of the Elven King and Bard in order to give them the Arkenstone. He wants to give them leverage so that bloodshed can be avoided. Gandalf's back, and he says that Bilbo is pretty wise for trying to avoid warfare. Bilbo sneaks back inside the mountain, and the dwarves have no idea. Chapter 17.
That was interesting because the Elven King was like, "You have you're welcome here. You can
stay here." And he goes, I can't leave my friends.
Yeah, that was a really big moment.
He's just trying to make sure that everyone can survive. It's not, he's not being disloyal. He's just like, you're doing this the wrong way, and I would rather you be mad at me.
It's that friend that kind of calls you on your shit, and it's like,
yes, which is my favorite kind of friend.
Agreed.
And people get mad at me sometimes for that, but it's, you gotta be honest.
You can always call me on my shit, Rachel. Chapter 17, The Clouds Burst. Bard comes to bargain with the Arkenstone. Bilbo admits his treachery, and Thorin casts him out. Meanwhile, the Dwarven army arrives. It's Billy Connolly, and it's a powder keg situation. But also, a goblin army led by a fierce goblin, Bolg, of the North shows up, and he looks really gnarly and messed up in the movie, along with an army of wargs and wolves. Bolg wants revenge against Dane, who killed Bolg's father. Sure. Looks like there are 5 armies here: humans, elves, dwarves, goblins, and wolves, right? In the book. The elves, dwarves, and men put aside their differences to fight the goblins, and while they're initially winning, a goblin counterattack makes these things seem pretty dire. Bilbo gets knocked out by a rock just after noticing the eagles on their way. Chapter 18, The Return Journey. This is the Battle of 5 Armies, happens in 2 seconds. Bilbo wakes up after the battle's conclusion and learns what happened. The eagles showed up as well as Bjorn in bear form, and it's tight. The battle has been won, but at great cost. Thorin is dying.
There's a magical thing about Bjorn, which I thought was really cool. Yeah. The more aggravated, he has bloodlust, or he's, it's like
he's
the
like
more
the Hulk.
Aggravated he is, the stronger he. Did you not read that?
No. That's like Hulk.
That's the coolest part. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. He was like,
awesome.
Like a vampire. Noticed what was happening. Noticed that there was a war going on, and there were goblins, and he got even more enraged to the point where it was like he almost had like armor where it was impenetrable, and he couldn't be defeated.
It reminded me of Eorik Bjornsson from His Dark Materials.
Probably named after Bjorn, if we're being honest. Probably.
Yeah. I mean, also Norse mythology, a lot of Norse mythology.
Right. Sure. Yeah. So the battle has been...
Bjorn means bear, right?
I think so. Yeah. UCLA Bruins means bear. Sure. The battle has been won, but at great cost.
In Latin.
Thank you, Maude. Thank you. Thorin is dying, but before he dies, he apologizes to Bilbo for being a total dick. If more of us valued food and cheer and song above hoarded gold, it would be a merrier world. But sad or merry, I must leave it now. Farewell. Also, Fili and Kili. Say that again, Maude.
Well, it's that thing where it's like, you can't learn that lesson on your deathbed.
Yeah, but he did, and it's a lesson for us to learn as children.
That's how life works. It sucks.
We know that Fili and Kili died. Thorin is buried with the Arkenstone and Orcrist, and Dane becomes the king under the mountain. Bilbo mourns and is weary of adventure. He takes his treasure, he only takes 2 chests, and heads for home with Gandalf and Bjorn. He tells the dwarves that they're free to stop at any time. Really sweet little moment. Chapter 19, The Last Stage. They reach Elrond's, where Bilbo hears the rest of Gandalf's story. The Council of White Wizards drove the Necromancer out of Mirkwood, and we readers know this as Sauron's weakened form, and he'll be back. Cool. And the movies do that in the same way, Peter Jackson. Gandalf and Bilbo split the gold they buried from the trolls way back at the beginning. I forgot about that part. When they get back to Bilbo's home, he's been declared dead because he's been gone for like 4 years or something, 1.5 years. And all this stuff is being sold at auction. Also, Bilbo loses his respectability for going on an adventure. So nobody else in Hobbiton thinks he's good anymore. And
I kind of don't like that. I wish that they were inspired by it. It's again where it's like, if you never inside your hometown, if you don't explore, if you don't, learn more, you stay ignorant.
But I think that's the commentary.
Small town, they've got that sort of traditionally, not to say that everyone in a small
town. I don't like it either, Maude. But guess what? This world is full of small town podunks.
But it also paves the way for Frodo to be a weirdo.
Yeah.
Who is inspired by his great uncle,
his grandfather.
Correct. They made Bilbo at the end of this book Doc Brown, so that when Fellowship of the Ring starts, Frodo is Marty, and they're both weirdos who like each other, and that's how they can have an adventure.
Who connect, and although he's not the ring for too long.
The book ends with him writing his memoirs, There and Back Again, A Hobbit's Holiday, as Gandalf and Balin visit. One of my favorite parts. So that was it. Now we can talk about the movies. Now we talk about whatever else until we are done. We've got about 5 minutes. Oh my gosh.
We have to continue this on Discord and Twitter, because we also have to talk about what we're reading next. But I will say, I'm so glad that everyone watched the animated one. I'm going to finish the trilogy so we can talk about it on Twitter.
Cool.
And
I'll watching clips on YouTube to remember.
Say that again, Maude.
I started watching a lot of the whatever clips were available on YouTube just to kind of record it all. Yeah.
Man, I wish I could just invite you over, but it's quarantine, and I could invite you all over, and I have all of them, and they're in 3D, and it's cool. Here's all I want to say about they're in 3D, the Hobbits. Here's all I want to say about the Hobbit movies. I think that they do have that unfortunate hurdle from a lot of fans because everybody sort of collectively decided it should have just been one movie. It should have been one movie, and I get that, but it's
done two.
And that was the original plan.
First act is quite
3 is egregious.
Yes. But I will say that so much of what I love from the Hobbit book, I think really is in the movies. And I think that there's a lot of great artistry and great performances and so much love of the Hobbit. It just had so many different hurdles that it did have to overcome. And I think that they're closer in quality to Lord of the Rings. Not there, but they're closer than like the Star Wars prequels are to the quality of the original Star Wars. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yes,
and I feel like people don't give them enough credit for that. I'm like,
that's fair. I would not. Yes. And my last note is just how cool and scary is Gollum in the animated one with his voice. I hear that voice in my head more than Andy Serkis, who does such a good job. No, stop. His eyes flashing would give me such, because it was just the colors changing, but it gave me nightmares. But also the Goblin song, and the goblins are scary and cool. That's all I got.
I'd rather listen to Gollum's voice in the animated series than listen to Eeyore from Winnie the Pooh.
Is that who? What? Why'd you bring up Eeyore?
Because they both evoke depression.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
You did say that when we were live tweeting it. You were like, this guy's bumming me out.
My birthday present.
Okay, we've got a few minutes left, and I think, Stephen, is now the time to go to the call to action. Is this it? Everybody, here we go. Homework time.
We're announcing our new book.
Get ready, everybody. Perk your butts. Here we go. We finished The Hobbit, which means it's time for our next book, and it's going to be a bit of a surprise this time. We're going to spend the next 6 weeks, put it in your calendarios, 6 weeks reading Frank Herbert's science fiction classic, Dune. This is the book that influenced so much of what came after when it comes to science fiction. Plus, you're going to be familiar with the story when the new film adaptation comes out. Now, normally, I'm so stoked on the new movie coming out that my plan was to wait for that and then read Dune for the first time. But I love y'all so much. I love the community. I'm so excited to do this. So because it is so long, we're going to spend the next 6 weeks reading this one. The novel is split into 3 books, and your homework is to read the first half of book 1. Stop at the end of the chapter that finishes with, "For the Father, nothing." If you have the recent paperback version, it's on page 157. Again, page 157.
They don't have chapters? Oh, that's so science fiction.
We'll find it. So stop at the end of the chapter, which reads, "For the Father, nothing." So you can check out previous episodes of Nerdist Book Club on Nerdist and Geek and Sundry's YouTubes or Geek and Sundry's Twitch. What was that, Maude?
That's going off.
Yeah, Chad is super, super excited for Dune. And not all 3 of us have not read it. It is my sci-fi white whale of a book. I have wanted to read it forever. I'm so excited. I can't wait. Extremely excited for the movie. So many beautiful people, so many amazing themes. It just
you know what I might do is, because I love listening to my movie scores, and I was already planning to do this, right? I love listening to my movie scores. We don't have a new Dune movie score yet. I might go back and do Blade Runner 2049 movie score.
Or Arrival.
Any of the Denis Villeneuve movies, that kind of sci-fi, and they're good scores.
That's such a good idea.
Brilliant. So that's what I'm going to do.
Reading Dodo Kiwi, who was brought it up in the first 5 minutes of this show, which was so funny, said, I have tried to read Dune so much, but I couldn't get through it all.
Join us. We've never read it. I've tried several times, but I will commit to y'all.
This is it.
We are doing
the group to do it, and we're going to break it down.
If anybody watching right now wanted to watch our old episodes, like I said, you can watch them on Nerdist, on Geek and Sundry's YouTubes, Nerdist and Geek and Sundry's YouTubes, Geek and Sundry's Twitch, right? If you wanted to catch up or relive your favorite parts of The Hobbit. So make sure that you like and subscribe. And Maude, what do we have going right now? What's happening right after this?
We are going to Geekbomb's Discord because we have an after show where we get on a call where you guys get to literally chat with us instead of just comment, and you can ask us a question and we will dive, I think, deep into, the movies, and we'll go into that.
Yeah, we can do more of that.
How 1977 movie and the recent movies? Like, did it do it justice? Were we glad about the 3 movies? Was it split very well? What were the better decisions that happened in the movies that didn't really happen in the books? We're going to do that.
All of that's happening. Yeah.
You can join Geekbomb's Patreon. So patreon.com/geekbomb. Join the lowest tier and you can get access straight away.
So we got to head over there right now, guys, because we're already running late. It's going to go from 6 to 6:30 is the plan. So until next
June. Mum says June has to be the greatest nerdy sci-fi book of all time. What did she say?
Mama Garrett.
Mama Garrett's never wrong.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it.
Follow all of us on Twitter. You can see our handles here, Nerdist, Geek and Sundry, Geekbomb, because we can show you unrelated, cool, nerdy book things.
Yes.
Like this.
Yes.
I'm going to record this on audio because it's
Is it a record? What is it?
It's a record.
Oh, that's
and I just found it again. So yeah, follow us. We love you. We're excited to read Dune. We'll see you on Geekbomb's Discord, right?
Yeah.
Now, yes, for the after show. Bye, guys.
Bye, everybody. We'll see you next week on Nerdist Book Club. Bye.
Bye.